Welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. We exist to connect people with others and God. We hope this week's episode helps you do just that. Enjoy.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. This is Pastor Tyler Wolf. I'm one of the associate pastors, and I pastor our Oconomowoc campus, and I am here with Brandon Metzger. How you doing, Brandon?
Real well. Thanks,
Good.
Tyler.
Well, thanks for being here today. First of all, would you tell us, again, I just introduced your name, but that's all we know so far. So would you tell us about yourself, your family, how long you've been coming to Bridge Church, how did you find the church? Just give us a quick little overview about who you and your family are.
Sure. So I've been coming to a Bridge for about 2 years. Came to Bridge in search for connection with people in Waukesha County. Interestingly enough, I came actually looking for a small group to be a part of, like Midweek. And I was surprised to find that a lot of other churches in the area weren't accepting new applicants. I think it was the summer at the time, so it was difficult for me to get plugged in. And so I came to Bridge knowing that you guys had small groups via the website, and that's how I found the church. I am a father of 3 kids, now 6. We are a blended family, divorced in 2014 timeframe, and then remarried in 2017 to my wife, Andrea. And I have 3 kids that are older, 2 boys and a girl, and she has 3 as well, so not quite exactly the Brady Bunch. By gender, but 6 kids in total.
Yeah.
So she has 2 boys and 1 girl.
Okay, cool. Well, that's awesome, man. It's a big family.
It is a big family.
What does a day look like for you? What do you do? What are you into?
Yeah, so I'm a scientist. I've been with the same company now for 20 years. I work in Palmyra, Wisconsin.
Okay, cool.
And I work in the science department developing nutritional supplements. Have a good team there that works for me. That's a big part of my ministry is my family at work and the guys and people that work for me. So that's a big part of what I do is development of employees.
Yeah.
Day I'm direct the R&D efforts there to develop new products as well as like new machinery and new toys that we use to manufacture supplements.
Sure. Wow. Very cool, man. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, let's get into the good stuff. I love that we got to hear about your family. And now I want to hear about your faith. How long, just as much or as little as you want to share. I love hearing stories. And at Bridge Church, we love sharing stories about people's journey from really whether it looked dark or not. We really believe that each person before they follow Jesus is walking in a life of darkness. So when you stepped from darkness into light, when was that? When did you become a Christian? And as much or as little more you want to share about your journey up until now. And then I want to dive into your experience with one of our Bridge groups.
Okay. Yeah, so my story starts at a very early age. I was born into a Christian family. But my parents actually had just migrated when they had me from the Catholic Church to a Baptist church. So my mom describes her relationship with Christ as being radically saved at that point. And she found the Baptist church. My dad kind of followed along behind her. They had 3 kids, so I have 2 other brothers, so 3 boys in total. And we were raised with the understanding of who God was and the importance of having a personal relationship with Him. So I remember at a very early age, asking Christ into my heart, maybe like 5 or 6 years old, numerous times, just understanding the importance of what that meant.
Yeah.
And then developing that faith as I grew, through middle school. A little more tentative in high school, and then I would say by the end of high school, I would, was really starting to ask those questions that teenagers do. Is this for me? As I entered college.
Sure.
And so during the college phase, I really feel like I was pressured to make that decision of whether I was going to continue following Christ or not, or walk away. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard for me to say when I was saved, but as in most of our journeys, it is a journey. And I found myself in college, asking those questions and seeing God provide people around me to validate and strengthen the fact that he is real and that he loves me through other people that I encountered in college. And so a couple key people, just kept chasing me and saying, we want you to become a part of our church or serve here, serve there. And I was, asking all these questions, and to me, it provided answers that God was pursuing me individually, that he loved me that much. And so, to shorten the timeline, after college, I was married, and then we eventually had 3 kids together, moved to Palmyra, Wisconsin, and started to raise a family. And things went pretty good, lived a Christian life, part of a church, and then all of a sudden in 2014, I found my marriage in need of repair, and it happened overnight. And so I ended up being divorced within, literally a couple weeks' time, not understanding what happened. Looking back on it, I made a lot of poor decisions in my marriage, didn't treat my wife the way that she needed to be. She made mistakes, and unfortunately in this fallen world, that ends up devastating a family. But I think through that, the journey of faith was the most clear and evident to me. Like, who do you go to in that disaster? And fortunately, because of all of the history of both, my parents and the church itself doing its job, I knew that God was real in that time when you questioned what just happened.
Yeah.
And so I knew exactly what to do. I was devastated, of course, but I knew where to run to get through that and to ask the difficult questions of why. And so then, the positive side of that story is that I knew that I needed the church in my life, and I quickly gravitated towards the local church that I was a part of at that time, and engaged in ministry, in music ministry, singing. I'm not a great singer, but I knew it was a healing thing for me.
Great.
And the pastor at the time was gracious enough to allow me to participate in that as part of my healing. So always thankful for that. But then I got plugged into a what's called divorce care group. I think we have one here that just started.
We sure do.
Yeah. And so I joined that through another local church here in Waukesha. I found it online, and that was really helpful for me to understand what divorce is and what it meant down the road for my kids, for myself, and finances, and all the great things that divorce care teaches.
Yeah.
And then again, God's grace, through divorce care, I met some great people and friends who were going through what I was going through, and we had the opportunity to talk and to share, our struggles together. And I selfishly had a goal to meet, other people at that time, girls maybe, through the class, because
Sure.
I lost a lot of my friend and peer groups through divorce. So over the course of divorce care, I found a particular young lady very attractive to me, had spent a lot of time just, seeking the Lord's direction as far as, when was marriage correct, when should I start dating? And I felt very clearly that God spoke to me and said, obviously other people in my life said, don't do it right away, just hold off. The Lord will allow that in his timing. And so I felt like I was very in connection with God and what he wanted for my life as far as if remarriage was going to be a possibility for me. And so then over the course of, I guess, a year afterwards, I began having a conversation with the divorce care teacher at the time. She was also divorced. Her name is Andrea, my now current wife. And so we started dating, and then we got married in 2017. So my divorce care teacher became my wife. So it's a pretty fabulous story.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And a few key things that stick out to me about your story is that you talk about your faith beginning to thrive on the other side of your suffering. And it reminds me of something I heard once. A guy had a stroke in his old age, and he said, "I don't wish the stroke on anyone, but I wish the grace of the stroke on everyone." And you could fill in the blank for you. Go, well, we don't wish divorce on anyone.
Yeah.
We don't wish any sort of suffering on anyone, but we wish the grace that comes along with any sort of suffering on everybody.
Absolutely.
Because there's really nothing like it. It's like a seed has to get destroyed in order for it to turn into what it's going to turn into,
Yeah.
Man, awesome story. God really is honored in the way that you shared your story. Yeah. So thank you. So one thing led to another. You find yourself at Bridge Church, and your family's coming here, and you get an invite to one of our men's groups, and it's called Radical Mentoring, and that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about. At Bridge Church, we don't have men's ministry or women's ministry the way people might expect it to be. We aren't just a church of different siloed ministries. We are a church of bridge groups. And so we have several different bridge groups for men. One of them is like a men's breakfast on Saturday mornings. Other guys meet over Zoom. Other guys meet over coffee. And then we have one, a very intense one, called Radical Mentoring. And it's a 9-month, really intense, really high commitment program that makes a huge difference. And what I love, and I'm going to be quiet here in a moment so you can share about your experience. What I love about Radical Mentoring is that it gets any fakeness out of the way. It seems like there's like an ecosystem inside of this men's group where any phoniness just can't survive. It can't exist. You have to show the real you, which is the opportunity to show who you really are is not only scary for men, but hard to come by. So all that being said, tell us about your experience in the Radical Mentoring Bridge Group.
So that was a great introduction to, what radical mentoring is. And actually, a lot of those things that you said were true for me. I mean, when I first heard of the program, I identified with it and that this is not something for every man. Like, you have to be special and called to kind of want to join a group like this because of the higher level of commitment. Mm-hmm. So at first, that scared me a little bit, having 6 kids and a pretty intensive workload. To think whether I could handle that. But really the main driver for me in finally committing to it was such a hunger for wanting to get to know guys who had a similar mindset. So, considering it joining the Special Forces and you want to get to know this group that you're going to be working with together. And I have, naturally, I think, I have a hunger to develop strong friendships with males that can kind of help you along this journey, because that's not something that I necessarily saw in my upbringing, and so it's something that I want very badly to change in my life. And on top of that, I don't dismay the fact that my divorce was some of my own doing, and I want to identify those things in my life of what I did wrong and be able to have a band of brothers around me who can help me in that process to say, hey, look, we see this in you. This is off. They'll be honest with you because you've developed this relationship with them that allows for that. Yeah. And so I think that one of the other big things that I liked about radical mentoring is, there is a lot of phoniness in the church, and that's something that is a real turnoff to me. And so to find a group where you can be authentic and you can express, your past issues or your history that's not glamorous, this group will allow for that and allow you to discuss those issues and then really grow through that. So those are the big things that kind of drew me to radical mentoring.
That's awesome. And I gotta say, I don't disagree about some of the phoniness in the church, and I actually I'm kind of gracious in that a little bit, because I think it's not necessarily a cultural issue completely in the church. That may be part of it globally, but sometimes I think it has as much to do with the pace of our lives. Mm-hmm. Think about, especially if you have kids, think about your Sunday morning. Yeah. Do you even have a chance? I mean, we're there to worship God, but unless you have the opportunity to really slow down, the chance for vulnerability, those can be hard to come by, which is exactly why we invest in having these other groups, because that's when you have the space to breathe, because you got to have the space in order to be vulnerable, So tell me more. What did God do in your life in the radical mentoring group?
So, I mean, I think if I can step back and talk about, the group of guys that I'm thinking about engaging with through this program, I travel for business, and I often find myself alone, like at a restaurant ordering dinner, and you don't know anyone around you. You're by yourself. So I always, didn't want to be uncomfortable in that. So how do I develop relationships with other random strangers? Like for me, and I think in our culture today, that's extremely hard for men to pick up even a conversation and not feel weird about it with a complete stranger. And so that's something that radical mentoring did, was it pushed me to develop friendships with guys that were not my age. Most of them were younger than me, had different career paths, had different, personal interests, and you're forced in this close-knit community to solve those problems. And, you're hearing their stories and the tragic things that they have been through or the joys that they're experiencing. And through that, you have to find some sort of connection. And so I think radical mentoring really helped develop that practice of developing, real friendships.
Yeah.
So that was huge.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Well, that's why we exist at Bridge Church. We exist to connect people with others and with God. And we think that sometimes people will connect with others here before they ever make a real connection with God, but God will connect with them through those relationships. And I hear you saying that happened for you in radical mentoring. Before I wrap us up, do you have anything else that you would share?
Yeah. So, a big part of, the benefits that I got of radical mentoring were, understanding habits that I have, whether it's, the way I handle money or the way I relate to my kids or my spouse, or even my parents. Relationships for me have been a struggle and an issue, and I'm learning even today, past radical mentoring, there are issues that continue to go on. It didn't solve, a lot of the things,
right?
But it helped me identify, ways to approach those in a healthy manner. And I think if I could, kind of give one takeaway message, big message that I learned, it actually came from Roger, the leader of radical mentoring. Something he said. Yep. So a couple of times, and I don't think this was from the program at all. It just came from Roger and all of his wisdom. But, I was struggling with self-control and the words that came out of my mouth, and they were damaging to my current wife, Andrea. And so, he said that I was having issue controlling my tongue and my anger, and I wanted to put on the fruit of the Spirit, right? Because all those things are good, and all those things I know would be beneficial for my kids and my wife. If I could just let them exude out of me, it would heal relationships. But somehow, in all my manly efforts, I wasn't able to control myself and put those on, put on that armor. And I was just struggling with control of that. And he said something that woke me up. He said, the fruit of the Spirit comes as an outpouring of your relationship or closeness with Jesus. And when he said that, it took a huge weight off of my shoulders of I don't have to work so hard to make this stuff come out of me. Love, joy, peace, patience. Those things will naturally come as you draw close to Jesus. Yeah. And so that's what I made my focus, is just doing that. And I think for a lot of men in struggles, specifically in marriage relationships, if I could speak to that, there's a heavy weight of what can I do as a man to fix this? And you're left a lot of times with no hope because what you tried doesn't work. Yeah. But I'm telling you that closeness with Christ, whether it's getting up early in the morning and reading the Word of God and finding His presence, journaling, these are major tools that we learn through radical mentoring. Yeah. These sorts of things help that connection with Christ, which ultimately changes who you are outwardly, that you would have no idea how that just happened. It's the Holy Spirit and Christ living in you.
I love that, man. Yeah, and that ministers to me and my weakness, because you really cannot force the fruit. I mean, if you just think about it literally as the analogy, think about it. Think about telling an apple tree to hurry up. Right. You know what I mean? It's just it shows how silly it is when we try to be better overnight, or use willpower. Do the work that Christ already completed, that only He can do. Well, Radical Mentoring is kicking off a new season at the end of the summer 2021. And if you hear this podcast and you or someone is interested in Radical Mentoring, please email info@bridgechurch.net right away. Once it starts, it doesn't stop, and once it starts, it's too late to join. It's a high commitment. I like to say, you probably heard me say it last year. Men are kind of like pickup trucks. They do drive straighter when they carry a load, and in Radical Mentoring, you certainly carry a load. You have high commitment, high expectation. But I want to encourage, if you're a man listening to this, I want to encourage you to reach out for connection and reach out to be a part of the Radical Mentoring Bridge Group. Brandon, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.
All right.